What is up, you guys? Welcome to Mindset Sessions by Off the Wall Therapy. I am Brock Eisman, and I am stoked to give you guys a look into the sport and performance psychology world. I am here to help you create tools and to optimize your potential. Let's get it. How are we doing, everyone? Okay, welcome back to Mindset Sessions. For those of you who have never listened to an episode, this is the interview. Today, I am lucky enough to have Shane, who is one of my oldest friends, on the podcast today. And Shane will introduce himself in a second. Across from me, I have Grizz.
What's up, you guys?
And for those of you who don't know how this podcast is run, Mindset Sessions, we have 3 different segments. First segment we're doing right now is interviews. Second segment is called Q&A, which is basically questions and answers. You guys can shoot in questions to my email, and that is
Brock at offthewalltherapy.com.
perfect. Or you can message me on Mindset Sessions Podcast, or you can message me on Off the Wall Therapy, and both of those are on Instagram. That's called Q&A. So we have interviews and Q&A. The third one is called P&B. That's the episode that was right before this, episode 18. And episode 18, we did Performance and Brain. So Performance and Brain is that third segment. Performance and Brain is basically taking research studies that we like or that people send us in that we want to talk about that all have to do with performance. So Performance and Brain, interviews, and Q&As. The episode today is going to be an interview. And obviously, like I said, we have Shane. Shane, you can say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, so Shane is, like I said, one of my oldest friends. We grew up in San Clemente together. He played baseball with me in college. He is now a father. Just had a daughter. And I really wanted him on the podcast because a lot of my friends, and I would say this, a majority of my friends, I have like a really deep connection to relationships, and it's probably all spawned from my relationship with Shane and spawned from my relationship with our other friend Brett, and we've been friends for a really long time. And pretty much every relationship I've ever been in, whether that be with other guys or women or literally any relationship I've ever been in, I always base it on this like very first friendship that I had with these two guys that kind of like was, okay, this is how friendships are. This is when someone gets a flat tire, who's going to be there to pick you up? If you're going to go and you're going to go cry, like who's going to be there to literally talk you through it, listen to you.
We've done that many times.
Yeah. So I just want to make this important when you guys are listening to this. This is a guy that kind of, he and I started that whole thing, and we'll talk about Off the Grid. We'll talk about things that he's helping me with and how involved we are in each other's lives. And really, I want the theme here to be how important relationships are and how important friendships are and how that affects your entire life and everyone around you. So that's kind of, Shane, you can kind of introduce yourself and who are you?
Yeah. So Brock mentioned we've been friends for a long time, all the way back to high school. I think kind of understanding that story would be helpful for people. So Brock and I first met in high school. We were playing freshman baseball together at San Clemente High School, which it's always funny that we're super close now, because I think when we first met, it was like this adversarial kind of standoffish relationship. I think we were both a little bit, I don't know how to say this, but like alpha in a way. And we were like kind of testing each other on some stuff. But fast forward, so freshman year we met, we played freshman baseball together, really had no relationship at that point. And then I think we really got close sophomore year of high school. And that's when you started going through some pretty gnarly stuff in your life. And then obviously Brett went through another big moment in his life. And I think that we can talk about that a little bit. I'm sure we'll get into it more as we go. But Sophomore year of high school, when you lost Carly, we really had no friendship at that point. But I remember distinctly the day when I was actually at a team barbecue for the end of the season and you weren't there and everyone was asking about you. And my parents came over to me and they said, Brock is in the hospital. He's there to tend to his sister. We're going to go say hi. And there was this overwhelming feeling for me of that's where I need to be. So from that day on, and we can again focus on a relationship and how that emerged, but I think from that day when we went to the hospital and we walked through that as a friendship, and then fast forward through high school, we got really close through that. I think it really started a perspective on relationships, and I joke about it now with my wife too, about how surface and small talk tends to not be my desire for relationships. And I think it stems from that moment. But through high school, close, and then college, we actually went different directions. You went to Northridge, I went to Westmont. We stayed in touch, kept calling each other, checking in on each other. But I think we really came back together at Vanguard. I remember when we went back to Vanguard, you were transferring from Northridge to play ball there. I had stopped playing baseball at the time, and you called me and you said, hey, come play summer ball with me. And I was pretty jaded. And that's a big part of my story too, of just bitter at the sport.
And you didn't play baseball that freshman year at Westmont too?
No, yeah. I didn't. Yeah, I hoped to get an offer out of high school, and then that didn't happen. So I got pretty bitter and put up the spikes. And then you called me and said, let's go play summer ball. And I said, well, what is summer ball? In terms of risk, there was nothing. It was just let's go have fun. So we did that, and then you were on a scholarship there, and I ended up walking on. So then we spent 4 years as ball players, roommates, friends, and now to this day we've both been in each other's weddings and now looking to raise kids together. So it's been quite the journey from that freshman year of trying to feel each other out. But
yeah, no, absolutely.
Why were you so you mentioned you were jaded. Like, was that just was that from sports or?
Yeah, was that like recruiting in high school? I don't really remember. I remember recruiting from when I was in high school. I was like, it happened so last minute for me.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of high school athletes that are constantly like really negatively stressed out about like, oh, this team didn't want me. I want to go to this school. This team, like, what was your experience with that in high school?
Yeah. So growing up, my parents, I'm going back because it'll play into kind of my philosophy of high school and recruiting and all of that. But growing up, we were super tight as a family, so we didn't participate in club sports a lot because it took away from Sundays, which was family day for us. So translate that to high school baseball, I didn't really attend any camps or anything like that, and I think there was a lot of pride there for me because it was this whole idea that if I'm good enough, someone will find me. So I didn't attend any camps, anything like that, and where I got jaded was I had this expectation of going to college to play baseball. So I was so overconfident at that point, I only applied to 2 colleges. One was in Colorado, which I knew I didn't want to go to Colorado, and 2 was Westmont. So by the time I graduated high school, I had no offers to play baseball, and the day I moved into Westmont was the first time I ever saw the campus. So I had this high expectation for myself that didn't really play out. And looking back now with some more maturity, I realize I didn't put myself out there enough to be seen, but I think I was bitter at the fact that I had committed my whole life and my whole plan to this idea that didn't ever play out.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that I always tell people in my story is, so in high school, obviously from sophomore year, Brock and I and Brett became super close. I always had Brock, Brett, my family, and baseball. Those were like my identities, really, in a lot of ways. I had tied myself to those, and then when I went to college, I lost baseball, I lost my friends, and I lost my family. So that was a super hard transition for me, and I kind of attributed it to losing baseball, but in the end it was more than that. So I think that played into the jadedness as well.
Yeah that's really like,
what was family life growing up? How many family members do you have?
Yeah, so my grandparents on my dad's side are from Cuba. So if you guys know anything about Cubans, it's always a big fiesta, lots of cousins, lots of holidays, and any chance you can get to spend with family is an opportunity to spend with family. So that's what we did. I mean, every weekend, every family trip, whatever it was family, family, family. And my parents were super intentional about raising us to value that. So every Wednesday we had family night where we'd go through the Bible. So I grew up in a Christian home. That was a huge thing in our house. And then Sundays, like I had mentioned, were always family day. And that didn't matter whether it was sports, whether it was some school event, whatever it was, Sundays were blocked off regardless. And that was the precedent my parents set. So I grew up super close to family, and we always were the house that everyone wanted to come to. I mean, high school, funny enough, I would come home and you and Brett would be at my house without even letting me know. So that was kind of how my parents wanted it and were intentional about making it. And I think that was a big factor into why I enjoy relationships so much now. But
got you. Do you have a brother?
Yeah, so older sister, who's my half sister, she's 37, and then an older brother who's 30 now, so I'm 2 years younger than him. So I'm the baby of the family.
Gotcha.
So
yeah. What's your relationship like with your brother and your sister?
So I'll start with my sister. Her and I have a really great relationship in the sense that we're always able to keep things light and fun. So she's always there for me, and she always has a way of kind of breaking me out of my intensity. So back to growing up, as intentional as my dad was with family, he was also very intense about keep moving. So once you reached a goal, what's the next thing, and keep going. So it kind of really created an intensity in my life. And I think my sister does a great job of pulling me out of the weeds and looking at these things that I'm trying to accomplish and saying, look around you, look at life, look at all the beautiful things you have. So that's like a gift that she has. She's a teacher, so I think that plays into it. She's very good with that stuff. And then my brother and I, funny enough, my brother and I growing up were actually not very close. I said this in my best man speech for him, but I used to do things to push his buttons. I think it's a younger sibling thing for sure.
Absolutely.
But we weren't very close. We were really polar opposites in a lot of ways. But I think as we've gotten older, we've come to appreciate our differences as gifts and talents. And now we actually work together. And it's been cool because the things that I struggle with, he's very talented at. And the things that he struggles with, I also have gifts in. So we've grown a lot together in that. Live in the same neighborhood, raising our kids together. And my brother is like the least complaining person I've ever met. Which is something I really admire about him, is that whenever there's something hard to do, he says, okay, let's do it. Never does he complain or try to find a way out. So that's always something I've tried to strive to be like from him in that way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What about your relationship with your parents?
Yeah, so my parents, obviously still very close with them. The intentionality as a kid leads you to just continue to be close with them. I think as I've gotten older, the relationship has changed. I think growing up as a kid, you admire your parents and you think they can't do anything wrong in a lot of ways. As you get older, you kind of see that they're humans too, and we all have our flaws. And so it's been really cool though now, starting my own family, looking back at the things that they did for us. I'm super grateful for how I was raised and the values and things that they instilled in us growing up. So to this day, you know, they're very close to me, share a lot of stories and bounce feedback off of them. My dad has always been the dreamer, the one pushing the intensity, as I mentioned earlier. My mom's always been the sweet soul. She is the most graceful person I have ever met. Rarely does she ever do anything for herself. So they really balance each other out, and I see both sides of that played into who I am today.
Yeah. And your dad coming from Cuba, you speak on that at all?
Yeah. So back up to my grandparents, I think that plays a huge role into that level of intensity because they came over from Cuba when my father was 9 years old. So they had ran a business in Cuba, and at that time it was just after Castro took over. And so communism was getting instilled, and the government basically made a deal that said you can leave the country, but you can't take anything with you. Clothes on your back, that's it. So they applied for a visa, and talk about taking a risk. They gave up everything they had. They buried money under the floor of their house in Cuba, and they went to Spain. And the day they landed in Spain, actually, they gave them like a little business card that said, here's your address, here's where you're sleeping tonight, go. So then they get this card, they go to this hotel, and they walk into the front door, and there's someone sleeping there. So now they have to go back to the immigration port, go through that whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then they wake up, and you have no money. You have 5 people, a family, and so you wake up and go, okay, time to figure out how to support my family in Spain. So from there, my grandfather moved them to New York, and then ultimately from New York to California, where he started an optometry business. And then my grandmother, man, what a story she has. So they came over to the U.S. and spoke no English, which to me is crazy because she decided, I don't speak any English, I'm going to go get my doctorate degree from USC. So she had her degree in pharmacy in Cuba, and then she went to go get it here in the States. But at the time, they were living in a 1-bedroom apartment here in the U.S., and so she didn't speak the language. She would sit in the front of the lecture halls with a recorder, record the lecture, bring it home, translate the whole thing to Spanish so that she could understand what the professor was saying. Then she would write her paper in Spanish and then ultimately translate it back to English to submit for a grade. Now here's the crazy part is she did it. They're in a 1-bedroom apartment with 5 people, 3 young kids and an older grandmother that they were taking care of, which was my dad's grandmother. And so she studied in the car. And she did this translation, writing all of her papers in the front seat of the car every night after the kids went to bed. So from that, I think my dad gained a lot of that intensity. And I think at that point, they had no choice. It was survive or don't, you know? And now here I am 2 generations removed, actually first generation American, which is pretty cool to say. But the life that they created in this country and the opportunity that they had, now I don't have to deal with the same levels of struggle that they did, right? It was survive or die for them. So I think that played a huge role into how my dad raised us, always appreciating the opportunity of this country, especially realizing that nothing's handed to you, you have to work for everything, and that this country gives you that opportunity to make a life. And again, the tight-knit of family, they didn't have anybody here that they knew, so it pushed them together to survive with each other. So I think those things, going back to my childhood, all played out in how I was raised as well.
I didn't know your grandpa was an optometrist.
Yeah, he started his own optometry business.
So when he was in Cuba, did he have like an optometry business there? And then
so they had a bakery and they had like a trucking business where they delivered, almost like a logistics company in modern times here. But they had 2 businesses there, so the entrepreneurial spirit was in him. And he came over here and basically decided optometry is a need. So that's how he made his living. And then they ultimately invested in real estate and made a great life for themselves. But here's a fun story. So both of them are deceased now. But we were cleaning out their house, and the communism thing never goes away. Like, it's still instilled in your mind till the day you pass. So we're cleaning out their house. We go under their bed and we pull out these bricks that look like a trash bag with duct tape on them. And sure enough, there were stacks of cash that they had stored underneath their bed because they didn't trust banks and they didn't trust the government. So they had like over $100,000 in cash sitting under their bed, to the point where the bills were stuck together because it had been so many years, and they never trusted the government or anybody else to take care of them. So they couldn't shake the communism ideas. So they said, I don't care what happens, I'm going to make sure that my family's safe. And if it means cash in trash bags, it means cash in trash bags.
Wow.
Some crazy resolve.
Yeah, it's a cool story, man. And it was so interesting because that was my dad's side. And then my mom's side was, they were raised here. And my grandfather was a Marine, and a totally different dynamic there, right? My grandfather was also in real estate as well, a businessman, but you kind of grew up with these 2 different lifestyles, one coming from communism and one growing up in America, both very successful and both play into how you shape your own identity. But it's just a super cool dynamic and parallel when you look at both of them. So
yeah, I'd say so. What's how has that resolve helped you grow from going through high school to then college to being a dad now?
Just how like my grandparents came up,
Sure,
playing into me now.
Yeah, just that that kind of fervor, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, you learn that nothing's handed to you. I think that's what I said earlier, and it still sticks to this day. My wife actually it has its benefits and it has its drawbacks as well. But it makes me live my life in gratitude in a lot of ways. I think that when you look through life of an immigrant that came here with nothing, it's very hard to look at your life as a first generation American going to college, having all these benefits because of their sacrifice. And it makes you avoid becoming a victim in a lot of ways. So I think that's something I always try to embrace is when I think I'm going through a struggle or a hard time, I try to look back at my grandparents and go, this is really a quarter of what they went through to make this even possible for me. So I kind of take it as a duty to honor the sacrifice and the risk that they took to come here to carry on that legacy in a lot of ways.
This makes me think about like your standards and your core values.
Yeah.
So they set the standard. They have core values that they instilled in your father that gets obviously passed down to you. How would you say the standards that they have set, those core values that they have set, how is that transferred into your life?
Yeah, so you and I have talked about this a lot, but the difference of standards and goals and those different things, I think that the transfer comes in those standards. So at the time, again, when you're in survival, all you know is I get up and I work hard. That's who I am. I don't know what my goal is really besides put food on the table for my family. So that's kind of how I try to translate to myself. When I get super in this big picture and try to set these huge goals, I try to break them down to, well, what does that mean for me? What's a standard? So a classic example of this is I think a lot of people look at weight loss and they go, well, I want to lose 100 pounds, right? And it's this big, hairy, audacious goal. And you go, well, how do I deal with that? Instead, it's the standard of what do people that are in shape do on a daily basis? And so instead of trying to achieve a goal, I'm trying to achieve the standard that ultimately generates the goal. So people that are in shape are people that go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week. So if I can just look at that and say, in order to get to there, all I have to do is become a person that goes to the gym 2 to 3 times a week, and that's my standard, and I make promises to myself and I keep them, then ultimately the goals will play out. So taking that immigrant mindset and translating it to now being a first generation American and using the same level of intensity and standard of who do I have to become to get to the goal, I think is how it plays out in my life. And so I get caught up a lot of times in these big ideas and these big dreams, and I have to dial myself back to something that's actually attainable, which is like a daily action, right? I can conceptually understand getting up and going to the gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if I can just do that consistently, ultimately it'll translate to what I wanted at the beginning. So I know that's a conversation that we've had a lot, is breaking down your goals to the point where it's almost a daily action, and then let time compound, and then you look up and go, wow, I'm here, right?
Yeah, you do something for a year or 5 years or whatever it is, even if it's really small, that totally plays into that.
Yeah, 100%. It's the compounding effect of time, right? And it's the same thing that they went through. They started, you got to figure minimum wage jobs, but over time they were able to compound their life and their efforts. There's a great book called The Compound Effect, and typically it's a financial term, but if you think about it in the sense of time, you realize that any effort that you're putting towards working out or podcasting or your business outside of monetary also compounds. So each time you take a step, you build a skill, and then each skill continues to compound until you look up 5-10 years back at your life and go, oh my gosh, look at how much I've grown. And I think that's kind of what happened with the baseball story, right? And when I was first in high school, I was all jaded about it because I hadn't gone through enough time in my life to realize that a lot of the reason why I didn't get recruited was on me and my responsibility to put myself out there. But now looking back, the advice I give to kids in high school is totally different than if you would have asked me at 18. So, yeah.
No, good answer. Yeah, core values. I think that is, because a lot of people call it core values. I call it standards.
Yeah.
You talk about setting goals. Yes, all those things, they all add into one really big thing, and that thing is like really who you are when no one is watching, you know. And I think that there's something to say, like, for people who don't know you, they don't know that you wake up super early to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? and you just had a daughter. So you're learning how to create a new standard, and I think that that's something really interesting. How old is your daughter?
She's 5 months now.
5 months old, right?
Yeah,
So
baby girl.
Yeah. What are some things that you've had to learn on how to adjust your standard?
Yeah, can I back up a little bit to your point? Because I think I went down like a goals and standards path, but to the core values thing, it's a similar design in my head of how I try to look at it. But I said this to my wife in our vows, going through stuff early on in life. You and I went through a lot of stuff that had to deal with death, right? And so you go to these funerals, and you live your whole life to create a legacy, a story of who you are, right? Who are you as a person, really, as your character traits? What do people remember when they think about you? They're not going to remember all the details. They're going to remember, one, how you made them feel, and two, what are the things that you did? Did you love them? Were you compassionate? Were you kind? The character traits, right? Mm-hmm. And I remembered sitting in a funeral when I was a young kid, listening to someone give a eulogy, and I thought to myself, what do I want my story to be when someone's telling it for me? And the only way I can do that is by exuding the character traits that I want them to remember and reflect on, right? And so creating that story for the person that one day gives my eulogy kind of starts me from the top, and then how do I work into that? So who do I want to be remembered as? A couple of things that I always try to say is I want my family to be number one. I want my wife and my kids to be up there and to say he never once thought about himself. Obviously it's a big goal, and I'm not perfect, but selflessness is a huge one for me. And then work ethic obviously is a big one as well, for them to feel like I never, I guess, took a break in a lot of ways, where they always knew they were getting the best effort out of me for the length of my life. And then ultimately that they were loved, cherished, and cared for. So now coming back to that, it was one thing getting married. You learn quickly where your selfishness is when you get married, especially for my wife and I, because we were long distance for 4 years before we got married. And then the day we moved in was the first day we actually lived in the same state. So that was a big adjustment. I had lived my life on my terms during the week, and then when I would see her on the weekend, it was just pour into each other, and then she would leave and it would be all about me again. So that was one level of selfishness that was revealed to me. Mm-hmm. Then here comes Macy, right, my little girl, and it was this whole new level of realizing that my life is truly no longer mine. Mm-hmm. And so I said these things in my vows to my wife about future kids and wanting to be selfless and wanting to be, I guess, remembered as never giving up or never slowing down, always putting them first, sacrifice, right, servant leadership, all those things that you say. And then when you have a kid, it's like, okay, here's your test, Shane. You said you wanted these things, now here's reality. And so different standards have had to change. I used to get up in the morning at like 5:30. Now I'm getting up at 4:30. I used to come home from work and I would either read or go on a run or go surf, and now it's my wife's home with the kid, and so now my responsibility when I get home is to play with my daughter, pour into her, make sure she feels loved and cherished, regardless of really how I felt from work that day. And so the standard that's really came out the most since having a kid is just that selflessness and that servanthood. To try to really live that out now is the true test of what I said I wanted to do to what I actually am going to do. But you and I talk about this, so I'm talking about this for a little bit, is why do I get up so early? And a big part of that is I feel like I can't pour into my family unless I have time for myself. And so I've realized that with my schedule, as soon as I get home from the gym at 6:30, 7 o'clock, everyone needs something from me. Whether it's my daughter needs me to rock her to sleep, my wife needs me to take out the trash, my clients call me and need me to give them a proposal. And so from that 6:30 to 6 o'clock at night, work needs me, then I get home and it's food and it's this and it's that. And I realize that unless I take an hour in the morning to really pour into myself, whether it's devotional, reading, just even times I sit in the parking lot in the quiet, I don't have anything to give. And so that's something that I've tried to create as a standard, is fill up myself first so that I can pour into my family, so that I'm not pouring from an empty cup, which is a metaphor we've always tried to reflect on. So kind of a long-winded answer to your standards question, but I think it all plays into it, right? And you define who you want to be as a person, and then you get the chance to live it out. And that's where you really put rubber to the pavement in a lot of ways.
Yeah. What have you learned from working with, because Shane leads the trips as well as Grizz, but Shane leads the trips on the off the grid stuff. What have you learned from talking with other men? Because we get guys coming from all over the country, outside the country. What have you learned from listening to other guys talk? Because we have this thing in off the grid where, like, we have guys share their story, and they'll talk about things that they're struggling with, things that they're working on, things that they've gone through. And it's a lot of the same conversation. Mm-hmm. But what have you learned from those kind of conversations about yourself, from conversations that we've had out there?
Yeah, what have I learned about myself? That I have a lot to learn. I think the coolest part about off the grid is that you get so many different perspectives in life. I mean, everybody has a different family, different kids, different personalities. Maybe they're single, maybe they're divorced, maybe they're going through a loss in their family, and you get to see globally all these different personalities,
different faith.
Yeah, and how they're tracking through life, right? So for me, the things that I have learned is, one, even though everybody's going through vastly different circumstances, a lot of the struggles are very similar for a lot of us, right? We kind of have these topics that we talk about every night, and it seems to resonate deeply with every individual. And I've also picked up routines and habits, little things that guys do for their wives, or setting date nights, or being intentional with their kids. I think that on a global perspective, learning how other people navigate the same struggles that I do has been super helpful for me. The other thing that I think has really stood out to me is just how fortunate I was to have a father that took me out and took me camping and took me to teach me all these different things about shooting and off-roading, and the need for that in men and the time for themselves is so needed. And I think that's the thing that always comes out of the trip. We get there the first day, everybody's unsure, and then the last day everyone goes, man, I didn't even know I needed this, but I needed this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's because they're filling up their cup. They're spending some time for themselves in a way that they may or may not have ever experienced before, but they go home feeling just full and refreshed. And I mean, so do I, right? That to me, the time out there and learning from these different men and how they're navigating very similar struggles is just so fulfilling. And I think it makes you feel human. It makes you feel like you're not alone. Like, oh my gosh, this person's struggling with that. I thought I was the only one. And I think that that's something that really, for me, I've grown into. Because when I would struggle with something, I would bury it deep and carry shame that, oh gosh, if people knew about this, they would think I was crazy. Like, I'm off the rails. Like, who struggles with that? How are you struggling with that? But when you go to these trips, people from all over the world, all over the country, different families, you talk about these topics, and everybody, although they have a different perspective, is kind of struggling with the same things, and it kind of is a combatant to that guilt and that shame about the things that you're struggling with. So I love those trips, man. I just think that it's so good for us to get out there and really open up. And I think that's, again, one of the big takeaways to answer your question directly is it's okay to open up. It's okay to be vulnerable. And as a matter of fact, it's good for you and it's good for your family to go ahead and share what you're dealing with. So,
yeah.
Filling up an empty cup so you can pour back into your family.
100%. And my wife tells me that. When I get home from those trips, she's like, wow, this is cool. Like, you're re-energized. You have new desires, new ideas, how we can grow as a family. And so I highly recommend anybody to get out and experience that, because it's scary at first, but like I said, the first day everybody's kind of, how's this going to go? What am I going to do? I have to jump in cold water? Why do I have to do that, right? And then they get back and they're like, I need to come again. And it's because they feel full themselves. At least I do. So I know, I think all three of us have experienced that. in a lot of ways.
Yeah, this last trip, I experienced something different too. Like when we got back, there was 2 different vehicles with their entire family in the vehicles.
Wow.
And we got back, and then we saw these families that these guys were talking about, and just to see how stoked their kids were that their dad, they're witnessing their dad going and focusing on something for him, you know, like his mental health. You imagine a kid, like I can't even imagine seeing my dad when I was younger. I think the only time I ever saw this is when he'd go fishing. He'd go on like an overnight trip with one of his buddies. I'd go see him do that, and I'd be like, oh, he's going and spending time with other guys. Like, and the cool part about this is that it's like the intentionality behind why we're doing it. Just going out and doing something intentionally that has to do with, oh, okay, I'm going to be more vulnerable. I'm going to go and do something that challenges me. And for most guys, the biggest challenge is being able to talk about your weaknesses in front of other men, because we are supposed to not be weak.
Yeah.
We're constantly battling. We have this grind mode that we're whether it's making money, whether it's being the hero, whether it's all these different things about being a guy. And then we have this opportunity to show up with other guys, and it's okay to be weak, you know? Like, and if you don't know what your weaknesses are you actually strong?
So if you don't know what your weaknesses are you actually strong? I don't believe so. And the most interesting part about this trip that I always take away is we do hard things, right? We go in this river that's 35 degrees. We go on this hike that's pretty vertical, and the whole goal is not to stop. We do physically hard things. But over and over again, if we ask people what was the hardest thing for you, it's to share. It's to open up and share your weaknesses. And I think that when we were talking about this before we started, vulnerability is a huge sign of strength, not weakness. So if you guys have ever had anyone sit across from you and share their story and really pour out to you, have you ever looked across the table and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe how weak you are? I think we all admire that, and we all at times wish we had the strength to share. And so vulnerability and strength, it's coupled with admitting your weaknesses and then figuring out what you're going to do to try to get better with it.
Yeah, and not using your weaknesses as excuses.
100%.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like, the reason why I am this way and the reason why I do what I do is because this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's what happened to you, but that doesn't define who you are.
Yeah, and here's the thing I always say about that is what's super cool about that is you have a unique platform to tell a story now. So, for instance, like my wife went through a tough time with her parents. They had a rough childhood in a lot of ways. I don't have the opportunity to share the story that she does. So now she has a story of coming from potentially a hard childhood with divorce and some other things. And when she gets to where she wants to get to, she gets to tell the story of coming from that. And it's this beautiful poetry of brokenness to restoration. And now, what does my own family look like? I don't have that opportunity. And yeah, it was a blessing for me to have good parents. But I think if people can shift and go, that's what happened to me. It doesn't define me, and is actually giving me an opportunity to tell a super unique and cool story that can help other people that are going through what I went through as a kid.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. That's good.
Anything to add to that, Zach?
Well, I was actually going to transition just a little bit and talking more about you now being a dad.
Yeah.
What is the hardest thing for you about being a dad?
Yeah, so...
You've only been a dad for 5 months.
5 months. Still a rookie, for sure.
And I was going to say, and it can kind of... It plays into what we talk about with Off the Grid. We got to be aware of who we are as men, like weaknesses and everything. So, like, what is the hardest thing about being a dad?
Actually, wait. Sorry, you can answer that question later. What are your biggest weaknesses, Shane?
My biggest weaknesses.
You should be pretty good at analyzing them now.
For sure. And there's a couple things. If you want to get a practical skill level, it's details like calendars. I double book us all the time. My wife hates it, but that's a skill. I think my biggest weakness as a person is patience, and as well as finding contentment with where I am today. So the first thing, patience, and that ties into your question about being a dad. So we'll get to that.
Sure.
That's probably the
Didn't mean
hardest
to
thing
just
for me.
like blow your question.
Oh man, I'm so heartbroken. No, we're good.
Patience is a weakness of mine. Patience with my wife, patience with my daughter, patience with myself is a huge struggle for me. And it came from my childhood, and now I'm trying to kind of rearrange and figure out how to deal with it. But I think that patience really is a testament to your contentment with who you are as a person. So when I'm with my wife, a lot of times she brings things to me and she's looking for me to be a friend, and I am trying to fix things, right? And so a big thing that we've worked on is, how do I have the patience to sit there and just ask questions without feeling the need to interject my opinion?
You want her to feel heard.
100%. And it's this battle between the intensity of, here's your solution, do this, it's fixed, what's next? And so translate that patience to my personal life and myself. That's the same struggle that I have internally with myself, trying to be patient with where I'm trying to get to, if that makes sense. So I tear myself down a lot. It's like this overwhelming insecurity that what I'm doing is never quite enough. I could always be doing more. And it's like, dude, on the weekends, my wife's like, can we just have coffee and watch a show? We watch a 30-minute episode, and I'm like, I wasted my whole day. And she's like, what are you talking about? You just worked for 6 days this week. You already did the lawn. You did that. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to do more. And it retracts me from being present in moments, because I'm constantly looking for what's next instead of being content with what's now, which is a huge struggle for me. And now back to being a dad, there's been things that I've been in the room, right? And my daughter just learned how to roll over. And I'm sitting there on the couch and I'm playing with her. I'm physically there, but my head's thinking about, how do I accomplish this? What am I going to do with that? I need to do this in the yard, right? All these things about what's next. She rolls over and my wife goes, oh my gosh, that's the first time she rolled over. And I'm like, wait, I just missed that. And I'm sitting right there, right?
So it's about living in the moment. Is what
100%. Being patient and content with what's happening in the current time, but still being motivated to move and grow and become better is a constant wrestle in my head. And it's always this battle of, okay, here's my daughter, here's my wife, look at my life, it's beautiful. I live in San Clemente, I'm on the beach, I have a healthy daughter, I have an awesome wife, I have a roof over, what can I possibly complain about? But then couple that with this crippling insecurity of, I always need to do more, and it becomes this wrestle of back and forth. And I think that's my biggest struggle as a person, and it's also my biggest struggle as a dad too, because having a daughter, what my daughter needs from me is for me to be there, to show I care, to be intentional, to love her, to cherish her, to make her feel heard, not for me to go make more money, not for me to go buy another house, not for me to go accomplish these things, because she won't remember that at this age.
Right.
It's this quote that I heard, it's like really punched me in the gut. It's like, the only people that remember you working late, it's not going to be your boss, it's not going to be your wife. The only people that remember whether or not you work late is your kids, because they're looking at it as, were you home or were you not? So that's something that I'm trying to grow in and reel in, so that I don't miss any more of those rollover moments with my daughter, because it happens so fast.
Yeah. Is that like, is that kind of a, do you feel like you need to perform for your family in that sense?
Yeah.
I wrote down a question at the very beginning of this, and I don't know why I did, but I wrote down a question to talk about ambition and contentment.
Yeah. That's exactly the conflict.
Yeah.
And
so
it's
like,
something I've always dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's just amplified when you have a family now, because like I said, when it's just you can justify all the reasons why you're not content, because no one else is relying on you at that point. I mean, you have family and other people that want to spend time with you, but really no one else is relying on your presence for their life to continue and be joyful. My wife and my daughter, they want me there, and I'm part of their joy and their happiness. So now I have this whole other side to consider when I'm thinking about, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be ambitious. But the contentment is not just me, it's the contentment that my family is desiring, which is my presence, right? And so it's funny you wrote that, probably because you know me so well and so many years of seeing me battle with all this stuff. But I think that it's a huge wrestle for all men. And to your point, Grizz, is do I feel an obligation or a desire to perform for them? I do. And I think that there is kind of like a minimum standard, at least in my own belief set, of effort for your family.
Totally. Yeah.
But if you have things and you have a life that is already beautiful, if your family's fed, you have a roof over your head, and you guys are all healthy, then there needs to be an existential focus on contentment.
Right.
Because like back to my grandparents, it's hard for them to be content when they're living on the street, right? I mean, they can find contentment in perspective of, well, I'm still alive and I have but the fight or flight of I just need to survive doesn't exist in my life, but I almost force it into my life. And that's unhealthy in a lot of ways for me and for my family.
I think that there's a healthy balance of that unhealthiness.
Probably.
I
no, you're right.
Because I mean the theme that I always go back to in my head, and now that I'm having a kid, I go to this as well. Sure, work, life, people outside of work and life, like there's this whole balance, you know. And that's kind of the theme that I've been pushing to all the off the grids is where do you find balance? Because everyone's balance looks a little bit different, but at the end of the day it's all the same. So ambition and contentment, I think the answer to that, I think that really what you truly need to look for and what we need to look for as leaders of our families is how do we provide balance. And that's by setting the standard, and that's by understanding that there are going to be good times and there are going to be bad times. How am I going to consistently set balance to all these things that are constantly trying to make me go up and down?
Yeah.
You know, when really our one and only job is to consistently be present in whatever moment we're in and to provide balance. That's within ourselves first, you know? And I think that's missed on a lot of, like, because a lot of people, they'll be motivated by ambition. Like, this is what I want to do. And then they'll write it off by saying, no, I'm doing this for my family.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to work for my family.
100%.
I'm missing the aspect of time, which is the most important thing for my family, you know, because I'm spending it other areas.
Yeah. And there's, again, just quotes that challenge me, right? Different things that I read and listen to. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the interviewer was asking the guest, and he said, okay, if I offered you $1 million today, would you take it? And of course, everyone said, well, yeah. Okay, well, forget $1 million. What if I gave you $10 million? Would you want it? Would you take it? Would it change your life? Yeah. Okay, now if you take that $10 million, the only condition is you don't wake up tomorrow. And then all of a sudden we all go, well, we wouldn't want the $10 million. And what he translated it to was, so what you're telling me is waking up tomorrow is worth more to you than $10 million. But how many times do we actually wake up and carry that perspective through our day?
Hardly.
We don't.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what you're talking about is finding the contentment in waking up while also still giving everything our best effort. And I go back to scripture on some of this stuff, right? There's verses that say, work as everything is unto the Lord and not unto man. Essentially, work hard. But there's also these things that say, trust and wait in the Lord for him and his plan to come to light. So how do you balance that? You're saying wait, but you're also saying work. And I think part of the conclusion that I've come to is where's your worth? So your ambition and the things that you're trying to accomplish is good, especially for men, and you want to work hard and you want to give it your best effort, but that doesn't define your worth, right?
Am I enough?
Exactly. You're enough by who you are with God, with your family, and that's the basis for your identity. And then from there, that should give you the motivation and the excitement to push out into your ambition. But your ambition doesn't define the contentment portion. I guess ambition should come from contentment. It's kind of like faith, right? It's the whole idea of works versus grace. It's like, well, do I do good things to get to heaven? Or is it God gave me grace, saved me from my destiny, for my sins, and it's that grace that gives me desire to do better things for other people. So that's the motivation for the good works. It's not the good works that create the saving. it's the grace, but the grace then launches you into, now that I have contentment, I know my worth, I'm excited to go out and essentially say thank you by going and doing good things, righteous things for people. So I think of it the same way with this ambition contentment thing. If I can find contentment in the things of my life and my family, that should give me the motivation and the desire to go out and work hard.
Yeah, that's good. I think of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, like trusting in the Lord with everything you have and not leaning on your own understanding. And as men, we like to lean on that hard work, that provision for our families and stuff. But it sounds like what you're saying is like when you are able to rely on that trust of the Lord, like he makes everything work out for you.
Yeah, and here's a balance question, right? It's the old saying of like, well, wait on the Lord. I always struggled with that, probably because of this is an inner conflict and a weakness of mine. But I'm like, so that means I just sit on the couch and a legion of angels is going to come and pick me up and drop me in the place I need to be? I had struggled with that. Like, no, you have to still live your life, but there's still this understanding that I have to wait and I have to be content. So, what do you advise athletes on when they're dealing with this? And how do you find balance? Like, what's your goal, or I guess what's your standard for finding balance in your life?
The standard that I have people set, it starts out with, like, the bones of it are my mental health, my physical health, and my spiritual health. That's where it starts out. And a lot of people have the first two. If you don't have the first two, that's a good sign that you should probably understand the first two. And then the spiritual health, whatever that looks like for you, if that literally starts out with you, I say the standard for most people, and even if you don't want to follow the Christian life, like the Bible is an amazing thing. It's a really old book, and there's a lot of answers in there. Even if you just understand the knowledge that's inside of that, even if you're not even going to follow it, like actually picking up that thing and learning how to read that, that would be like the first step to the spiritual health thing. Obviously, the first two, the reason why I say the first two is that's because that's your actual physical being, what you do every single day.
Yeah.
Your mental health and your physical health, they're extremely related, but if you're not focusing on them every single day, there's no balance, you know? And obviously, when I say physical health, it's not just working out.
Yeah.
It's working, you know? And your mental health, it's also working, providing, like doing all those things. And when I say mental and physical, you're going to think, oh, therapy and physical, like working out. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about figuring out, what is my brain doing? Like, how can I optimize my brain?
Thinking about your thoughts.
Exactly. How can I think about what I'm thinking about, what I'm thinking about?
Right.
And then the physical side, it is literally your physical being. Like, what do you do to your physical being? Are you overweight? You know? Like, is there something that you're doing where you're overweight? Yeah, okay, working out, that's great. More in the sense of like, am I working 60 to 80 hours a week and not seeing my family and not focusing on my actual physical being of being right here, right now, like you're talking about. And then spiritual, obviously, like learning about like my worldview and all these different religions and what does that mean? Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
You know, like why, like not enough people ask that question. Why am I here and where am I going to go when I die?
Yeah.
Like those are my, if you're thinking about the spiritual side and you're going, no, I've already done this, whatever. If you're not asking the question, why did I get here? And where do I go when I die? Like those are the two most important questions that you should be asking yourself, and then trying to figure that out until you die.
Yeah.
Because it could be tomorrow. Like it really could.
Yeah.
And if you're not asking that question, how did I get here? Where do I go when I die? No matter how old you are, no matter how smart you are, it does not matter. We are all going to die.
Yeah.
And if you aren't trying to gain information and knowledge based on those two questions, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I think that this is a conversation. We talked about relationships earlier, and the theme of this is relationships and how do we grow in them. And when we went through your sister's passing in high school, that's the question that became the forefront. So I remember that was the first time in my life, because I was always an achiever, right? I had to get good grades. It was, you got to get good grades. You need to do this. You need to be good, perform, right? And the next thing you know, you go through something like that, and you realize none of this matters. Like this assignment I'm going to turn in, whether I do or not, it doesn't matter, because there's this grander perspective of life and death and family that is really what we need to center ourselves around. And I think that's what you're saying, is if you can ask those questions and come up with an answer, whether it be the Christian faith, whether it be a different faith that you decide this is what I'm centering myself on, now all the other stuff is just auxiliary to this anchor that you have. And I think that that's why our friendship has lasted so long. And we've had our differences over the years. We've fought about things, we've disagreed on things, we've challenged each other. But at the end of the day, we've looked at each other and go, that none of that matters. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we're going to die. Things are going to change, and we're just going to be left here with, how did I treat people? And that's how people are going to remember me.
Relationships.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of blame you for this, just so you know. It's like friendships now, I told my wife, I'm a super relational person, but like the first 10 minutes of a conversation, I just don't enjoy, because it's like, well, what do you do for work? You know, where do you live? All these things. And it's a flaw of mine. But I think at a young age, when we went through that, we jumped straight to this deeper side of perspective. And so I want to know, like, what do you care about? What are you driven by? What are you passionate about?
Where's your purpose?
Where is your purpose? That's a perfect way to put it. And my wife, God bless her, when we first got married, or we were first dating, that was something I skipped over all the small talk. And I asked her, why do you want to get married? And she's like, can't we just go to dinner? And like have fun? But I think talking about those things and going into a relationship like marriage, those are super big things that you have to understand about each other to ground yourself in this same perspective of life. So when you have a big bill that you can't pay and you're late on your this, or you get laid off from your job, you're still back to what really matters. Where's my perspective? Does this really matter, or is this going to be in 5 years from now something that we laugh about?
Yeah, that makes me think, like, who in your circle, if you're okay with sharing, who is your circle? Who is your trusted, like your tribe, like people that you really can go to and connect with emotionally, spiritually, ask questions, whatever it is. Like, what is, if you're okay with sharing, like, who is your circle?
Who matters to you?
Not that.
Oh.
Because you could have a lot of people that matter to you, but like really, like your circle. Like, who is your circle? I want to make it really important. If you don't have a circle, what does that make you feel like?
Yeah, alone. Lonely. Yeah.
Yeah. So who is in your circle? And I know from Off the Grid, our circle is getting bigger, but really throw down like your tight circle.
Yeah. So
you don't need to name them.
I'm going to go outside of family, because inherently I'm close with my family, but I think even outside of that, you need a circle that you can talk to about your family. So
absolutely,
like I can't talk to my brother about my relationship with my brother. So building your circle is, to me, just a super important thing. So the way I try to think about it is I have probably 3, 4, 5 close friends that I really confide in. I have a lot of companions. I'm a pretty outgoing person, and I make a lot of friends, and I still keep in contact with them. But when I'm in the deepest parts of my soul, there's certain groups of people that I go to. And I think, obviously, you and I have that relationship, other friends I have that relationship with, but there's different areas to connect with different people. So, for instance, I'll go to you a lot with our marriage and our spirituality and these things that we're really connected on. Now, if I'm going to go talk about a real estate deal and my fear and have someone walk me through that, I'll probably go to somebody else, right? And so I probably have 4 or 5 friends that I really let into the deepest parts of me. I'll share my story openly, but those are the people that, depending on what I'm going through in my life, I always know that they're there. Back to the question of, if you have a flat tire at 2 a.m, who's going to come and get you? And those are the people that, to this day...
Well, I hope you can change your flat tire.
Yeah, yeah. That's a lesson at Off the Grid. Learn how to change a flat. Yeah. But without naming names, I would say there's a tight circle there that, depending on whatever I'm going through, those are the people that I go to. And marriage, right? You have your spouse, who's definitely the person that knows you the best, but who do you talk to about your spouse? It can't be your spouse all the time. So that's one thing that I like to hit on when we talk about circle, is you need people in your circle that are going to push you towards what you're trying to achieve. And I talk about marriage big on this because there's struggles in marriage, there's disagreements, it's hard at times, and you want friends that are going to push you back to your spouse, not offer you an avenue to gossip about your spouse. And I think that's something that's
huge.
It's so prominent in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because when you go gossip, you're going to someone that you know is going to validate your side, and it makes you feel better, but it doesn't help your relationship with your spouse. Because all you're doing is going and validating all the things and your frustrations, and you're going to someone that you know is going to tell you the answers that you want to hear. And so I try to go to someone who's going to be willing and courageous enough to say, actually, Shane, you were wrong. You need to go back to your spouse and apologize.
Okay, so this makes me lead into a question. What is your thought on judgment versus not having judgment? This is a tricky one. Yeah. I've been thinking about this recently because I've always liked the thought of having like a friend or like a family member or someone that you can literally say anything to and they don't judge you.
Yeah.
But when is it like okay, or when is it right to have judgment? And have judgment on your own, like over yourself.
Yeah. So,
because you're always told not to judge.
Yeah. My dad called it observation. Like, you don't. He's like, judgment is for God. We observe other people, and if they ask for like our input, we give it to them based on our observation.
Yeah, and I think that, so there's a couple things with judgment that I always try to keep in mind, right? First thing is, I can't give anybody a conflicting opinion that doesn't already trust me. So I've been in conversations with people where I just met you, you tell me something that I completely disagree with. It does me no good to push back on you and say, I don't agree, and now we're in an argument, right? They don't know who I am. They don't trust my opinion. They don't trust that I have best interest in mind for them. So that's the first thing I try to do with anybody that I would be willing and, like we said, courageous enough to push back on, is they need to trust me, one, with my intentions, and two, that I'm looking at it from trying to help them, not hurt them. So if I don't have trust, I don't have anything in a relationship. Then the second thing is, I talk about this a lot, is expectations that people set for themselves is basically what I can hold them to. So if you come to me and you say, I want to be a husband who doesn't stay at work until 8 o'clock, and you, Brock, tell me that, now I feel that I have the opportunity to hold you accountable to that, because it's something that you stated you desire. So when you come to me and you said, hey, my wife's really upset with me, you know, and this is an example, but I've been having to work really late, and at that point I'm going, okay, well, you told me this is what you wanted, so let me remind you, hey, Brock, love you. Let's go back to the first conversation. Remember, you told me that you wanted to be there for your family, and you didn't want to be doing exactly what you're doing. So some people think that's judgment. I kind of look at it as accountability to what people have told me they're trying to create for themselves. And I think it's the same thing in business. It's the same thing in marriage. It's the same thing in all these different avenues. I don't think it does me good to hold somebody accountable to a standard that they have no desire to hold themselves to. Then it's just judgment, because I think that they're wrong and I'm right. And I think this happens all the time in Christian faith, right? You meet somebody, they just got into the Christian faith and they drop an F-bomb. It's like, what do I do with that? Do I condemn them and say, well, maybe you shouldn't be cussing? Well, what does that do for them? It doesn't do any good.
Yeah, they don't know you.
But if they come to me as somebody that they've said, okay, I want to try to clean up my mouth and I don't want to cuss anymore. Well, now I have an avenue, and they would only come to me first with that trust to say, okay, remember you told me this, so I'm raising a flag for you to keep you accountable to the standards that you're setting for yourself. So that's what I try to do a lot of times. Now, if someone asks me for my opinion, I'll give it to them. But I think facilitating opinions without getting the trust of the other person is really just two people trying to prove a point rather than actually hearing each other and trying to convince the other person of their opinion. I think it's something we've lost today in debate, right? Everyone, I always say this, if you're debating for the sake of debating, it's pointless. Like, if you really are that passionate about something where you want to go and convince somebody of it, that should be your goal, is for them to hear you, consider your opinion, and then actually have a chance of them potentially accepting it. But that doesn't happen if it's just this battle all the time. And you see it in politics and other areas. But anyway, judgment to me is not hearing from the other person what they want to be accountable to and just throwing it in their face when they never set that standard for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question kind of going into the marriage, dad, and family life, and kind of going off of what we had just talked about there. I love reading the book of James. Goes over a lot of just practical stuff with the Christian faith and how we act and how we live. And in James 1, it talks about being quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How do you deal with that as a married man and dad?
Yeah. You wrestle with it. You grow in it. I think that something I always like to say, just talking about faith, is that I am the sinner amongst sinners, right? And I have just as many sins as anybody else. And I think that's something that I always try to highlight when I talk about scripture, my faith, or things like that, is that I'm a sinner saved by grace. That's the bottom line. And so if I can operate from that principle, then we can be on the right foot, especially in my family. So this is something my wife and I talk about a lot, and the slow to speak, slow to get angry thing. I think that there's a deeper level of trust in a marriage relationship that you have to have with your spouse. And it's not a trust of, this person's not cheating on me, I can let them go out with their friends, I trust them. It's a trust of what they say and how they say it is with the intention of loving me. And if they knew that it was hurting me, they wouldn't have said it that way. So I have to trust that, or else I'm going to get angry a lot. So this happens in my marriage often, where I'll say something the wrong way, and my wife will come back to me and say, hey, I know you didn't intend for that to hurt me, but how you said it did. And she can only say that if she truly trusts that my intention is not to hurt her. And if I knew I was hurting her, that I wouldn't have done it that way. So I think that is a way to avoid getting angry with each other. I want to hit on the first portion of that verse, which is slow to speak. And I read a great book called The 4 Pillars of a Man's Heart, 4 Pillars of Manhood. It's by Stu Weber. He talks about a man kind of has 4 tools in his tool belt. One of them is like the friend, then there's the mentor, then there's the warrior, and then there's, he calls it a king. It's kind of a bad word for it, but essentially it's this person that is making decisions and fixing things. So I try to be slow to speak and listen to my wife to figure out what she's asking for. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but which version of me, which tool is she asking for? Is she asking me to be a friend where I just need to listen and she's not asking for anything else? Is she asking for me to be a mentor? Basically, I want your advice. And then, or is she asking me to fight for her? Is she asking me to step in and help her and protect her? Or is she asking me to ultimately try to fix her problem, right? And if you slow down enough, you can start to kind of gauge what they're asking for. And then there's the times where you still don't know, which I've tried to get in the practice of, okay, are you asking for friend or mentor or fight? Which one are you asking for here, so that I can direct myself in the right direction? And I think that's really helped our marriage, and it only comes from being slow and trying to understand the person that she's needing me to be in that moment.
Yeah.
So,
got any thoughts on that, Brock?
Changing subject here a little bit.
Great.
I want you to answer me a question that has to do with your daughter. And we just took a little break, and we got back from the break. And while you and I are in the restroom, I made a comment that had to do with, this is going to be here even when, hopefully, as long as the internet's around, when you die,
mm-hmm.
what does that make you think about? Like the fact that your daughter, whatever age she is right now, like I don't know what age she is right now when she listens to this, but this is going to be something that she listens to that her father is speaking on when she's 5 months old.
Yeah.
You know?
Trippy to think about.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily know what question I will ask. I'll come up with it at the end of this. But what does it make you think about right now?
It takes me back to a couple of things. One, it's back to the funeral and what are people going to say about me when they're standing up there and I'm gone, and what story are they going to tell? Because right now I'm speaking from a place of this current time frame, right? My opinions, my thoughts, how I'm dealing with things in marriage. I'm talking about being a father when she's 5 months old. The content may be completely different when she's a teenager, right? It's a whole different set of struggles. So when I think about her listening to this, again, my whole thought and my hope is that she sees how much I care and how much I am intentional with my thoughts, with our family, with loving her, admitting my weaknesses, so that she can listen to this and hear that her dad's a human. I think growing up as a kid, I always looked at my parents as like these superheroes, and it wasn't until later in life that I saw that they had weaknesses, and it made our relationship more transparent, because I was like, oh my gosh, like my dad struggled with the same thing I did. If I would have known that, I could have talked to him with it, right? And so I hope she hears this and thinks about honesty and my transparency. She sees that dad isn't perfect, but dad cares. And the part that's super intriguing to me with the internet being around is I'm interested to re-listen to this like 10 years from now and see where my perspectives have stayed the same and where they have changed. But for her, again, I hope that she sees transparency and willingness to just share who I am and what I struggle with, because if she knows that dad struggles, my goal is that gives her the window or the avenue to come to me when she's dealing with something that she's struggling with.
Why did you want to start a family?
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to be a dad. Just kind of inherently growing up, that was a big thing for me. Obviously being close to my family, it was like, well, that's what family looks like, so that's what you do when you get older. But now it's not just something that you do because it's a learned behavior. I think it's something that you do because you're excited about, and that you get to have an impact on your kids and you get to change their lives. So like having a girl, I think it's funny because a lot of my friends are like, oh my gosh, you have a girl, are you nervous about this world and the things that are going on, and remember how you were as a teenage boy? And those thoughts cross my mind, but I think having a family gives me the opportunity to be the outlier in that situation. And that's what I've been super excited about, to start a family, to play my part in being that dad for her that so many people are missing. I think that a lot of people's stories are unfortunately, I guess, told with a broken family, or a dad who wasn't there, or a dad who didn't tell his daughter how beautiful she is or how much he loves her and cares about her. And so it's super exciting for me to look at my young daughter and see it as the perfect opportunity to be the outlier in that situation, to be the dad that tells her how beautiful she is, that she's loved, that she's cherished, that she's fought for. And to me, that what greater gift is that than to influence someone else's life and to make them feel loved and cherished. And so the original question was, why start a family? I think for me, it's a small part that I can do to make a difference in their lives, and ultimately they can go out and make a difference in the world in a lot of ways. So I think change happens a lot from nuclear family, and then people come and they go start their own families. And so if we can create good, healthy families, and then our kids create good, healthy families, and their kids create good, healthy families, we can really influence change across not only the U.S., but a lot of different countries around the world. Mm. And I mean, you guys probably have seen the statistics. Orange County, it's like divorce rate is, I think, 70%, 60-70% now. Probably have to be fact checked on that, but again, it's an exciting opportunity for me. I don't see it as fear. I see it as opportunity. So, and then ultimately, it's a super big joy for me. I talk about influencing her life, but when she listens to this, when she's old enough, what she's not going to have realized is how big of a joy and an impact she's had on my life. And I think that as parents, we always think about our kids and how do we make their life better. And we sometimes don't slow down enough to see how they're potentially making us better, bringing us joy, changing us, right?
I actually had a research study that we did. I think it was the first Performance in Brain, and it talked about why being a father actually makes you happier. And I know that a lot of fathers, I got some emails back saying, I don't see that right now.
Yeah.
But at the end of your life, the thing that you go back on is you think to myself, like, what legacy have I left behind?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a child, and for those who aren't able to have children, and you think about legacy, your legacy is different. But if you directly have a child, that is your legacy. You know, I would say that your legacy goes into a bunch of different facets.
Yeah.
And for those who don't have children, that's extremely hard. I was in that headspace for 4 years, you know. But I think the opportunity to leave a legacy is it's huge. It's a huge blessing.
Yeah. And here's the thing about legacy that I think about a lot. And there's I think a lot of people get wrapped up in the macro legacy of what is the world going to remember me as? But the interesting part of that is if you take it out to scale, nobody's going to know who you were in 5 generations. No one will even know that you existed. But if you can focus in on your family and a legacy that you're leaving in the microcosm for them, it gives you a whole different sense of purpose. And regardless of whether people 5 generations from now that are not in your family remember you, that doesn't matter. What matters is what legacy are my kids going to remember me with. And that to me is the ultimate gift of fatherhood, is the opportunity to do that, right? To leave that legacy micro with your kids, your wife, your friends, and not care what anyone thought, because people will forget you even existed. So it's an interesting thought that I wrestle with a lot. And it's back to the whole perspective thing, right? And purpose, and why am I here? If we try to create our legacy around how much money we had, or are we viral on the internet, in 3, 4, 5 generations, you could have billions and billions of dollars. You could be the biggest followed person on social media, but no one's going to know who you are. They're not going to remember you. And so does that really matter? Or is it back to the micro level of who am I influencing in my family and my friends and the people that are close to me? So when I think about legacy, I try to keep it in that realm rather than worrying about what people think about me as my legacy.
Yeah, I like it. You want to keep it simple. That's good.
Yeah, that's a hard thing, man. Dealing with other people's opinions of you outside, it's not easy to do. It's something that I struggle with. It's hard not to think about what these people outside of your circle are thinking about you. And I think that you do want to influence people positively, but at the end of the day, they're not the ones that are going to really carry that legacy unless they have intentional time and time spent with you. So it's an interesting thing, especially in today's world, right? The whole social media influence is all about showing other people what I am good at, what are my highlight reels, and for what, so that they have a cool perspective of you. But then I look back, it's funny, to what we used to post in high school. We're people are going to think this is so cool. Then you scroll back on your Instagram 5 years and you're like, what was I doing? Right? Anyway, just a sidebar there, but legacy, man, that's big.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any more questions you want to ask?
I'm good, man. That was really...
Okay, so I did come up with a question for the last one, and it kind of ties into legacy. And this is for your daughter, for people like myself, people who are close to you. And this is a heavy question.
Oh, gosh.
if you weren't going to be around tomorrow, so if you were going to die tomorrow, what would you like to say right now, right here on this podcast? If you were going to die tomorrow.
Jeez.
You're going to make me cry.
What would you say?
To my daughter or just in general?
In general. This is something that if I had the opportunity for the people that I've lost in my life, if I had the opportunity to hear them answer this question, I would give the world to have this question. And I want to know what you would say.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is I'd probably talk directly to my wife and my daughter. I'd say I love you. I cherish you both. There's nothing greater in my life that brought me more joy than the two of you. Then the other portion of that I would tell them is to honor me would be to not be hung up on the fact that I'm gone, but to carry on the things that they took from me and to live out the legacy that I was trying to put out there but didn't have the time to. And I think that that's something that I'm not trying to flip this because this is a deep thing, but something that I've really admired about you and our story and our friendship was that you lost your sister and you decided, painful, and back to the earlier conversation, this is something that happened to me that was very difficult, but I have a choice. And what am I going to do with that? And that's really how you launched into psychology, sports psychology, your desire to do off the grid to help people because you were trying to honor your sister. And so you took something that could have easily made you a victim and you turned it into purpose. And you're now honoring her legacy. And so that's what I would tell my family is it's okay to be sad. I miss you more than anything in the world. I love you more than anything in the world. But if you want to honor me, live out the legacy of what we've been trying to create as a family, and you'll see where joy can be found in that. The pain doesn't go away. The hurt won't go away. But whenever you do something, you'll think, wow, my dad would have loved this. Mm-hmm. You know? And I think that you and I still go through those times with your sister and different people that we've lost. It's like, I would want them to live in a way where they would go, wow, Dad would be so proud. Or, wow, Dad would love this. Look at this river. Look at this mountain. He loved coming out here. And so telling them I love them, I cherish them, they bring me the most joy in my life, but not to stay in the pain. Don't let the situation become... I need some water. Don't let the situation make you a victim. Instead, choose to continue on that legacy that we were setting as a family. So, and that's the goal, right? It's like, we're only one person. And if our legacy dies with us, then is it really a legacy? But if we pass and there's others that heard it, appreciated it, and decide that that's something worth carrying on, to me, that's the ultimate satisfaction of life. Is for my kids, my wife, the day that I go to be like, yep, his legacy, we want to carry on. We need other people to hear this. We need other people to have the desires to grow into this and carry this on. And if I can do that, then I would feel accomplished. So I didn't mean to flip it, but before we're done here, I just want to say that's something that I admire about what you've done with your life and your career, is you've taken an immense pain point and you went through hard times, but you chose to never be a victim to it. You chose to embrace it and take your sister's legacy and put it into your life's work. And I mean, look at what you're doing now, you know? The impact that you're having on so many people's lives, from off the grid to off the wall. It's just a testament to how powerful those legacies can really be and how powerful they can be multiplied when you refuse to be a victim to what's happened to you. And to be honest with you, if I had to say anything, that's probably what your sister would look down and say, that's exactly what I would want you to do, is to carry on that legacy. So you went deep, dude. You went deep with that question, but
Yes, he did. Classic Brock.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
You gotta finish this out, Zach.
You want me to finish this out?
Yeah.
Do you want me to ask Shane a question? Or you want me to just close it?
If you guys made it this far, I'm glad that you got to hear about Shane, one of my closest friends, and yeah, I think that caps off the end of this episode. And love you guys.
Love you too.
Shane.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Shane.
I always love spending time with both of you guys. So keep it up.
All right.
All right.
We'll see you later, you guys. Thanks for listening.
Peace out.
Bye.
Carmen, commencez par votre niveau de l'opéra.